Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the average time a person spends on their computer, phone, or other piece of electronic device connected to the internet has grown substantially. Some view it as a blessing. As working from the comfort of your home has vastly become a new norm, those privileged to have the opportunity to do so oftentimes have more time for other activities, thus making life more relaxed and stress-free. However, there is unfortunately a more sinister side of this coin. Those who want to cause harm on the cyberspace, too, have less obstacles in committing in their plans. Various organizations report that cyber attacks have risen almost sixfold as the pandemic went on. In those unusual times, one can ask, what can I do to better prepare myself in the face of such a tremendous threat? Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Cybersecurity presentation done for the New Technology Seminary of the University of Wrocław's Applied Computer Science and Measurement Systems. In this presentation, we will take a look at why the threats, conundrums, and challenges posed to the cybersec experts, what the countermeasures taken to minimize the risk and the potential harm done by the various types of attacks, and finally how the short introduction of personal good practices linked with safe existence in the web. We will focus only on the newest events. If you'll be more interested in the history of cybersecurity or the threats linked with it, there is vast amounts of information waiting to be searched and learned about. So I highly encourage you to get out there. That said, let us begin. To be honest, I've had some second thoughts as for this particular topic, if it's fresh enough, so to speak. If there is enough new content to make a presentation about. Unfortunately, I didn't have to wait very long for a proverbial sign, because a rather unfortunate event has occurred. Facebook happened.
Holy Jesus!
3rd of April, 2021. The personal data of over 500 million Facebook users. Their names, surnames, phone numbers, email and personal addresses. Basically everything they have linked with their accounts, being private or not, have been released on multiple hacker sites. A third biggest data leak in history, caused by the vulnerability in the site's API. The aforementioned was used by the Vietnamese hacking group to siphon out as much data as they physically could, and then just release it for free. We won't cover all the technicalities which led to the attack being possible in the first place, as it would better be reserved for the video of its own. Basically, a problem with the API got mixed with the company's aggressive promotion of its two-factor identification, which uses the user's own phone number stored in the Facebook's database. Knowing that, the hackers used phone numbers basically as an indexing mechanism while plowing through the exposed data. The consequences of data breach this big will be felt far and wide for the years to come. So, having established that cybersecurity is one of the most important aspects of safety nowadays, let's start our conversation about the topic by the Know Your Enemy principle. Before we take a look at the newest countermeasures, let's take a look on what we are against first. Part 1. Classification of attacks. There are many types of security exploitation on the cyberspace. The majority, however, can be attributed to 3 basic categories: passive, active, and those relying on social engineering. The basic principle of passive attacks is patience. The victim does not feel the outcome of the danger immediately. the attacker simply utilizes some form of system vulnerability to install some sort of surveillance solution, and then, slowly but surely, gathers all the information he's after. A keylogger sending all the keystrokes from the exposed computer, network surveillance, wiretapping and intercepting data packets sent from and to the aforementioned. Sooner or later, the user will have to type in some credentials, personal info, send a file containing sensitive data, all of which would lead to the hacker granting access to, for example, the bank account. Installing unwanted software on the victim's device can be utilized more actively, of course. Thus, the name of the other type of attacks. An active attack can vary from the DDoS to outright destruction of the company's assets. I'd like to cover that first one in more detail. A distributed denial of service, more known as simply DDoS, is a type of attack which main goal is to generate such a great amount of traffic on the server that is being attacked that it will render all the attempts to connect to the service provided by the server impossible. There are a few ways to do it, the most proficient one being the usage of something called a botnet. What is a botnet? Here comes the malicious piece of software I have mentioned before. Instead of siphoning out the information and risking detection, a malicious piece of code simply makes the device's sheer computing power available to the attacker. One device trying to contest the server's capacity will not be enough, but a network of bots, all sending requests at the same time, and those requests being even more amplified by various techniques, can cause a catastrophic failure even to the widest of bandwidths. How many computers can there be in a botnet? 100? 1,000? The answer is much, much more. The most prominent ones are Mirai, which total infection is estimated at more or less 500,000, 3VE, with about 2 million, EmoteNet, Dridex, both with number unknown at the time of making this presentation. The Zero Access, clocking at about 9 million devices, with the absolute record-breaking and devastating Mariposa botnet, covering almost 190 countries, and with estimated 12 million devices at the peak. You probably noticed that I have used R instead of where at the beginning. That's because EmoteNet, Dridex, Mirai are still operational and are being used to this very day. The main problem with the botnet is that the fact that it utilizes so many devices, it can use a minuscule amount of each device's computing power. Thus, the average user won't even notice that his device is sending some malicious data, which leads to those botnets lasting for years. The question remaining is, how do we know about the existence of those that are still active? It's simple. It becomes just another form of service. If you know where to look and can pay the given price, you can actually rent one of those for whatever your intents are. And there is a vast market for those services nowadays. From your typical hacking groups to outright terrorist organizations, the highest bidder takes the prize. We've covered some sophisticated forms of forcibly stealing your data from you. But what if those actions were not really necessary? What if an attacker manipulated you into simply giving away all the info he needs. Here, we enter the social engineering category. Those attacks rely on some social techniques which have a common goal in lowering the victim's awareness, gaining their trust, or making them think that the information they are required to provide is being used in the legitimate way. Lately, the most common ones are the various forms of phishing, vishing, voice phishing, and smishing, SMS phishing. Those are, for example, the famous Indian guy from tech support scams, mainly targeting the English-speaking part of the world, but the derivatives of the aforementioned being utilized in other countries as well. This technique relies on the belief that the person you are making conversation with is a banker from your bank, technical support specialist, or some form of authority. By making some unusual demands, example being to give them the SMS code you got from your bank, your credentials, personal info, or, in extreme cases, requesting a direct payment for some made-up service or some sort of fine. The scam groups operating on those principles are making literal millions of dollars every year. Part 2. Countermeasures. We discussed some of the threats awaiting us in the cyberspace. Let's see how those are being fought against. The latest developments of the AI research and machine learning are already leading to the vast improvements in the fields of virus and attack detection. The biggest example so far is the MIT's AI squared, at the time of its creation, predicting almost 85% of cyber attacks, using input from human experts. Google has its cloud services data protected by self-improving artificial intelligence. The company itself also promotes the machine learning very strongly. Facebook might be a bad example of the multi-factor identification, but the concept has evolved vastly over the years. From the somewhat novelty it has been in around 2015, nowadays it is almost mandatory for a new piece of software to have it, if it operates on some sort of authentication solution. A research done by Google in 2019 shows that their solution has blocked all of the automated bot hacks at the time. However, a recent study shows that the solution is still not implemented in the majority of pre-existing systems in US-based companies. Still, the groundwork has been done, and it seems that the MFA is here to stay. In Europe, we had a somewhat of a revolution of the private data protection in recent years. Since the GDPR was introduced, all of the services provided within the Union must comply with its strict policy regarding the usage of user data. The GDPR is strongly enforced, with almost 500 penalties given to the various institutions over the last 2 years, resulting in millions of euros in fines. The renaissance of the blockchain technology also contributes to the overall security of the data. The decentralized, scattered database, which guarantees the safety of the stored data, has a variety of usages throughout the industry. The most of the attention is focused on the most influential blockchain-based invention, being the cryptocurrency, which revolutionized the way we look at money and value nowadays. Part 3. Increasing your security. If you want something done properly, do it yourself. That saying can be easily applied to our everyday interactions on our devices when it comes to cyber threats. There are a number of ways in which one can improve their overall security. Here are some of the most widely used ones, as well as some good practices to use. So, you have a somewhat strong password. It means almost nothing if the database it is stored in is breached. That's why you should change your credentials regularly. You never know when the next breach would happen. Seeing that almost every major IT corporation had their servers hacked at some point, it would be safe to assume that it is not the matter of if, rather a matter of when. Storing your data is also important. Use encryption to secure your files and store your credentials safely. By safely, one can have a few solutions in mind. If you trust that a password storing software is enough for you, go for it. If not, well, ultimately there is yet no known way to hack into a sheet of paper. Check if your data hasn't been leaked. There are many sites that can search through a number of leaked databases, giving you the information if it's time to change your passwords. Sites as haveibeenpooned.com, or in case of the recent Facebook breach, haveibeenzucked.com. The names might be quite hilarious, but the safety of your data is not. Be sure to check the web addresses from time to time. A difference between logging into your account at Microsoft.com and domains like Microsoft and Microsoft is a difference between security and losing your data. Lastly, it is highly advisable to use a VPN when browsing the internet. Be careful though, as mentioned before, no service is 100% safe all the time. That concludes our journey into the world of cybersecurity. Remember, the topics and examples shown below are just the tip of the iceberg. Cybersecurity is an incredibly vast, ever-changing spectrum. As long as there will be a potential profit, there will be a person who is willing to take it, legally or otherwise. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you found that presentation informative and fun. Have a great day. Goodbye.